Hey Dunchbags, what's going on? It's Landon Remixes here, and welcome to my review of the debut album from the American producer Siren. This one's called Afterworld. Now, you guys have been requesting this one a lot. It is his debut, but Siren actually did release a debut album 2 years ago under the name Siren Soul, which he had gained quite a bit of popularity over in the Monstercat scene with his release with Varian called Moonlight. But following that, he kind of had a fallout with his Siren Soul alias, moved on to making music as just Siren, and we haven't really heard much from him. In fact, we didn't really hear anything from him in the year of 2015, mostly because he was working on this debut album. This album could basically be an EDM version of the soundtrack from Transformers, where you're hearing a lot of the same robotic sounds and all these different kind of dubstep-y elements and electronic noises. Although I'm making out this to kind of sound bad, this album was actually pretty solid, to say the least. But since we should probably talk about my picks with it right now, other than the fact that it sounds like Transformers banging, let's talk about the length of this thing. Whereas Method to Madness had 15 tracks, all basically bangers, which I wasn't too into, this one extends out to 18, which really does make sense why he waited so long to push this thing out. But overall, if you're going to release an 18-track album, they usually have to be pretty short for me to be able to retain my attention span, or just be super interesting the whole way around, taking me as surprises every turn, whereas this thing gets a lot of samey feel about halfway through. And there are some redeeming qualities about this album, especially toward the end. The last few tracks were pretty impressive, but I think there's just a big, a moderate to big chunk toward the middle of the album where I think he could have just cut tracks and made this a shorter but better album. Since we've got 18 tracks and I don't want to go into an 18-minute long review, I'm going to talk very short on the tracks that did really stick out to me, whether in a good way or a bad way. The sound design on the track Afterworld is actually super cool, and that's one of the things where Siren really does go right in this album, is that his sound design has clearly progressed from where he was in his dubstep phase, and for the most part I think this album is just straight experimental electronic, not necessarily veering into too much house music. Speaking of house music, let's talk about A Grand Illusion, which, call me an idiot for liking the one house track on this record. This one's a little bit more future sounding. It's a really cool track. Kind of reminds me of where Barely Alive went with their house tracks on We Are Barely Alive, their debut album. But I really do like that style, and I'm probably going to be playing this one out a few times this year in my gigs and mixes, so look forward to that. A few of the tracks on this one are kind of that slow house, let's say indie dance, future bass sounding, especially on Vagabond. He didn't completely drop the dubstep sound. On tracks like False Idols, we get this really hard kind of dubstep-y sound, although he is still taking a bit of an experimental route. He does stick to his roots a tad, taking a little bit harder of a sound rather than the more melodic approach he usually took. Another big problem I had with this album is the fact that Siren doesn't really bring a lot of vocal approach to this thing. There are a few tracks that we do hear on it, Lose Myself, Paradox, and High Places, but overall this thing gets very boring, especially like I said in that long kind of drawn out middle section where we're not getting much that we haven't heard already on the album. After about 7 tracks of fairly disappointing to average material on this one, we finally get Revelation, which is one of my favorites on the record, taking a little bit more of a future bass sound, which is some of the more interesting approaches to this sound that I've heard thus far since I started listening to future bass music. Paradox featuring Apollodor takes some sounds that we previously heard on the album, like in the title track Afterworld, kind of closing this thing off. Combining it with the vocal really helps, and I think this was one of the more interesting twists on the album. And the album closes off with an amazing yet disappointingly bonus track featured, High Places featuring Yo Maze. His vocal approach on this song actually, I think, took a little bit more of the same route that he went with his song Fake Music that came out, I think, a couple of years ago. That was one of the first songs that really got me on his radar. But overall, that didn't distract from the fact that this is a really cool track, and I am, like I said, very disappointed that this is considered a bonus track, because this is one of the best songs on the record by far. Siren, if you wanted to make this into a nearly flawless album, I literally would have taken out that 7-track section. Everything between False Idols and Revelation, I would have cut that entire section out, and this thing would have been an 11-track masterpiece. Closing off with High Places would have been the best choice possible, in my opinion. I actually might just get this record and then cut out that section because I don't want to have to listen through it. High Places is interesting because it takes a few different styles and meshes them together in a way that I really haven't heard before. It's kind of like a deep house, glitch hop, hybrid kind of track, at the same time kind of taking a melodic and happy approach to it, which I typically don't hear. Super interesting, and especially adding the vocals made this one a masterpiece. And this album definitely wasn't bad. There's a lot of sounds in this one that you can really enjoy. Like I said, check out my favorite tracks. If you didn't know, I put my favorite tracks in the description, and if you want some real thoughts on what I think are the best sounds on this record, you can go into that section and just kind of check out, or just preview the songs on iTunes, figure out which ones you like. I think this one's deserving of a 6.5. Like I said, there is a big section on this album that really bugs me, and this album probably would have been a solid 8 to, yeah, probably about a solid 8 for me if you would have cut out that and kind of replaced it. I do respect the fact that these tracks are there, but they weren't really doing a lot for me. If they were, this album would have gotten a higher rating, especially being able to make an 18-track album that threw me at interesting turns all across the board. This one didn't do that. If it had, then I probably could have given it a 9 or higher. I didn't dislike this one, even though I made it sound like I really did. I didn't, and definitely excited to see what the future holds for Siren. Can't wait to hear what singles he's probably going to drop after this album's hype kind of dies down a little. And hope you guys enjoyed this review, because I know you guys have been requesting this one for a while, and I'm really hyped to hear the new music that's coming out in the next couple months. I think we're going to have a really good year. I've already got tons of stuff lined up for February and March already, including some awesome new music from Haywire and Karma Fields on Monstercat. This is absolutely going to be a year for albums, especially for Monstercat and dance music. I absolutely can't wait to hear what we have in store. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this kind of seemingly extended review, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.